Good Friday morning and welcome to this week's episode of Finding God in the Dark. My name is Don Stevens. I serve Asbury and Woodstown and St. John's in Harrisonville. John.
uh, Jonathan Campbell, and the pastor at Lacey United Methodist Church in Forked River, New Jersey.
Amen. And this week we are talking about this is the second time now, Jonathan. You and I are talking about a film that is still in theaters.
Yeah, yeah.
You don't often get to do that, so this is fun. We're talking about Inside Out 2, which is, as the name indicates, is a sequel to Inside Out, which came out 5 years ago.
Yeah, it sounds right.
Um, it is, without getting too heavily into the storyline, the basic premise is you're seeing, in Inside Out, you were seeing this one girl's emotions from inside, very basic emotions at the beginning, right? In the first film. In
Yeah,
the second film, you're getting more complex emotions, and well, I mean, we'll probably get into this, but the very idea of developing her personality around,
yeah,
her emotional responses to things.
yeah.
The voice talents in this include Amy Poehler and let's see, who else do I have here? Oh, Lewis Black. Lewis Black is as Anger. Oh, it just I'm
He's
sorry,
good.
cracks me up.
He's good. Yeah, no question.
Frank San Francisco, you just ruined pizza.
Yep, yep.
um among others, there are I think Bill Hader plays Fear,
Okay.
and Phyllis Smith. Anyway, um this second film kind of sets the tone of the main character Riley going into puberty and becoming
Yep,
a teenager, and how more emotions become more complex. So
yep.
um what's your take on it, John? Let's start there.
Um, well, since we're doing theology, right?
Sure.
I'll dive right in.
Yeah.
Uh, I loved the fact that it is very Wesleyan in its understanding of human nature, I
Hmm.
would argue, because there is not a belief in full depravity. So the Reformed idea that we are totally lost in our sin, that none of the Imago Dei, none of the image of God is left in us. We can't we can't make a decision. We couldn't choose to do good if we wanted to. That kind of stuff.
Right.
The way they present it in the movie is this idea that she is a combination of good and bad. She's a combination of a lot of different things. A lot of things flow together to form who she is. And that's, in my opinion, that's very Wesleyan. It's this idea that we are not totally depraved. We are not totally lost in our sin. There's always something good in us that is the residue of God's good action of grace in our lives to create us, to be with us. That's always there. And I really appreciated that because that I really, obviously I'm a Methodist pastor, that resonates with my understanding of what it means to be human.
Right.
Is we are sinful, we are broken, but we are not totally lost. And there is good in us, and there's good in all of us. And we are a mixture of things.
Yeah.
And I really like that idea that's really captured at the end of the movie. This idea of,
Right. Well,
yeah,
this is a change from the first film, right? And the first film was really about Riley's core memories,
yeah,
right? About her self-identity,
yeah,
right? And initially her self-identity is built all around things that Joy has controlled, right?
yes,
And basically her self-identity was, I'm a good person,
yeah,
period.
yeah,
And it was just one color, one sphere of,
yeah,
a little complicated, but it was all one thing.
yeah,
And then by the end of the film, with the influence of these new emotions, anxiety and embarrassment and envy and that sort
yeah,
of thing, her sense of self
yeah,
becomes much more complex, and
yeah,
that identity changes constantly, which
yeah,
you're right. I mean, that's exactly the idea of human nature.
Yeah.
I had to tell you, it was for me, it was really interesting that I went with my wife, who is a
Mm.
PhD psychologist.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the film. I thought it was really cute, and I
Yeah.
thought it had that, it certainly had this theological aspect, and it had this whole idea of personality and self-actualization. And
Yeah.
my wife was, well, it seems a little simplistic. And and well, they didn't, they talked about anxiety, but they didn't really tell about how to deal with anxiety. I was like, it's a kids movie. Ultimately, it's still a kids movie.
You got to leave some meat on the bone for In and Out 3. You know, yeah.
Right. A little bit.
Yeah,
It's
I went with two. I went with two of my sons. One who just graduated high school, and the other who's going to enter in his sophomore year. And in the car, we made jokes about what the third movie could be. Like,
Oh, that had to be interesting.
yeah, I won't go into it because some of it.
Yeah, well, okay.
But yeah, this I really did. I listened. You know, when I watched this, I'm like, wow, this is really. I would argue our understanding as Methodists human about what human, the doctrine of human nature for us is we're not totally bad and we're not totally good. We're a
Right,
mixture of that.
right.
And, and the idea that she doesn't lose that inaugural idea of self that she's a good friend,
Mm-hmm.
but she also has to deal with the fact that sometimes she's a bad friend.
Right.
And and what I loved about it is neither of those won. You know, one didn't get thrown out. They were both part of this this kind of, it almost looked like a flower arrangement. So um
Right.
and it was part of the flower arrangement. It was part of who she was. But neither of them were cast aside. They were both there. She's a
Yeah.
good friend sometimes, and sometimes she's a bad friend. And she had to figure out how to integrate both of those realities into her. And I really feel like I feel like that's a healthier way to understand humanity, because it's easier to say, okay, me, everybody, we sin, we do things that are wrong, we do things that hurt people, we are broken, but you're not cracked all the way down. You're not something that needs to be thrown away. There is something divine, and there is something beautiful in you, and there is something good in you, no matter how far you've slid down that road of feeling like you're lost. You're never completely gone. And, you know, for me, I've always been bothered by, since I've learned about it. I went to a Presbyterian seminary, so we
Okay.
learned about uh, total depravity. And honestly, since I pretty much heard it, I'm like, that doesn't feel right. Like, you mean God made us good, and because we screwed up, we lost all of that?
All of it. All of it.
It
You don't get
seems
to
like
keep any of it.
it seems like God's work might be a little more powerful than what we do.
And that touches on something I think that, okay, you went to a Presbyterian seminary. I went to a Baptist seminary, right?
Yeah,
And so, we obviously get those questions when we
yeah,
were coming through the process, right?
yeah,
And what is it that makes you a Methodist? And what, you know, to me, the thing that has always resonated was that Methodism was just different. It felt like, it felt relational more than, like the Presbyterian I did, total depravity, only God can save you. Well,
yeah,
yes, but
yeah.
you still got a little bit of something to do here.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
yeah. It's that, to me, I always talk about it as, because I'm sure as a pastor, and even I wish he would have used different language than lose your salvation. You know,
who's Wesley, you mean?
yeah, Wesley. And when when people hear that, I understand they freak out. I understand that. But what I always say is think about it as a relationship. And that was really what this movie was about, in terms of, it was a relationship about her, right?
Hmm.
An internal relationship of herself. But to me, salvation is a relationship. God saves us. We can't save ourselves. We are saved by grace through faith.
Right.
I don't disagree with that. But we have to accept the gift, and we have to make the gift part of ourselves. We have to choose to use the gift.
Right.
And I use the example of someone can give you a Christmas gift and you can unwrap it and play with it, or you can put it up in your attic.
Right. And
And
never open it.
yeah, and if you never open it and put it up in your attic, then that gift, there's no way that gift does you any good. And to
Right.
me, that's the same thing about salvation. Salvation is God's full gift. We can't do anything to save ourselves, but we have to cooperate with it. We have to accept it. We have to allow it to be part of us and allow it to change us. And that's what I liked about this movie, was really about her becoming an incorporated human being and taking these different parts of herself and
Right.
bringing them into community.
Right.
And
And don't you find it interesting that the real catalyst for that full integration of her personality wasn't sort of the main emotional character in the two films has been Joy,
yeah,
but it wasn't really Joy that was the catalyst that created her full personality. It was anxiety,
yes.
which is really interesting.
Well, again, it goes back into the movie we watched last week, 25th Hour, that in a weird way, the troubles of our lives, the sufferings of our lives, the anxiety of our life, sometimes really gives birth to who we truly are.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And how we respond to it, how we recuperate, how we live into it or run away from it. All of that stuff shapes who we are. You know,
Exactly, both. Not, you're right, not just how do I process it, but how does it process me,
yeah.
right? How do how do I, if I avoid it, that's a whole other personality direction I take, you know?
Well,
If
and
I
what,
bury it,
yeah.
that's
and
it
what
comes out in other ways.
and what I liked was that two very negative emotions were introduced, or things that we think of as negative: anxiety and wasn't shame, but what was it?
Embarrassment.
Embarrassment.
The one with the hoodie.
Yeah, those two emotions, embarrassment and anxiety, we usually think of as negative.
Right.
But the movie really develops in a way that shows you that they are necessary parts of who we are.
Yeah.
They serve a personal and social function, and they are as necessary to her as Joy is. And I thought that was beautiful. Like I'm very glad, and I know they wouldn't have done this, but I was very glad they didn't put them on the catapult. They didn't put those two emotions on the catapult and
And
send
then shove it to the
anxiety.
back of the
Like,
mind.
how we're going to deal with anxiety is we're gonna shove it to the back of the brain. No, it's part of who she is. It's
Right.
a necessary part of who she is. But it's something that has to be balanced with all the other emotions, and that was kind of the point of, again, let's go theological, right? Um, the beautiful part of the Nicene Creed, I think, that we lose because it's not in English. We lose it in English, but the word that the church fathers chose to use to talk about the relationship within the Trinity is dance, right? And you really see that idea with her. She has to get all of these emotions dancing well together, right? And incorporated well together. And that's kind of the point of the movie. And what I loved was at the end of the movie, she calls forth the emotion to have control. She invites joy to the console, kind
Right.
of in its glittery way. It's kind of like a spiritual kind of thing, but
Yeah.
it's this idea that joy's not going to be at the head of the council, head of the console, but neither is anxiety. They're
Right.
gonna they're gonna take turns, and sometimes, you know,
And I think they're going to identify when Riley needs
yeah,
whichever one, which
yeah.
was that was kind of the end part. It was anxiety saying, no, Riley needs you right now, needs joy.
Well, and I love that because again, anxiety is usually something that we really run away from in this society.
Yeah.
We don't. I don't want to go down this road, but we could talk about how we really struggle with medication around anxiety, and do we over medicate people about
Right.
anxiety and all this stuff. What
Right.
I loved was at one point toward the end of the movie, they pull up a chair for anxiety, they set anxiety down, and then you realize the role anxiety plays. So at one point they go like, "Hey, what are you worried about?" or something to the effect. She goes, "Well, we have a Spanish test tomorrow. We really need to study." And they were like, "Yeah, you're right. Let's study." And you realize anxiety can serve a really healthy function in a person if you know how to deal with it and you allow it to work well with the rest of your emotions,
Right.
right?
Right. And that's one of those things I think, you touch on something I think important there is that how we stigmatize anxiety in the
Yeah,
society, right? Not
yeah,
just with medication, but like, you want to eliminate, you shouldn't be anxious. And
yeah,
okay, scripturally it says be anxious about nothing, right?
yeah,
But the reality is you're going to be anxious about stuff. Look, I'll be the first one to admit I have dealt with
yeah,
almost crippling bouts of anxiety at times
yeah,
and seen a therapist about it, and he was very, very helpful.
yeah,
And I'm at a point where I don't have to, that doesn't run my life, but it can get that way. It was that scene when anxiety was just circling the whole console and nobody could get to it because she was just so frantic. And Riley, what's she doing? She's having a panic attack.
yeah,
I never quite got that far, but I've been, anxious to the point of like, what do I do? I don't
yeah,
know what to do. And, you're right. It's extremely healthy. And I mean, it's God given. This is how you're made, right?
yeah,
It's extremely healthy that you have anxiety, but that it doesn't control you.
yeah,
It has it has a say in your, you're like, hey, I've got, well, the test, right? I've got a thing that's due. I better get working on it. Uh, that's healthy.
yeah,
I've got a thing that's due, and I don't know what to do about it, and so I don't do anything. That's not healthy.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. I just I appreciated that none of the new emotions got, sent to the back of the brain, but
Yeah,
there was this recognition that they need to be incorporated.
yeah, and I'm not sure the one was really an emotion. Ennui,
Yeah,
boredom, is that an
boredom.
emotion? It's an emotion.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a stretch, but at the same time, that's very much a reality when you're a teenager.
Ah,
Yeah,
preaching to the choir, man. Well, you got teenagers,
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, yeah. I think I really thought it was a nice way to help young people maybe engage with how they feel and recognize these things aren't scary. They're not things that you avoid. They're things that you deal with.
Well,
You know?
reality, they can be scary, but they don't have to be.
Yes.
That's the thing. I think the stigma in society just creates the fear, right? You don't well, if you're anxious, you shouldn't be anxious. Nobody should be anxious. Why am I anxious? And
Yeah.
it escalates. Whereas, a film like this kind of gives you permission to go, okay, that's a thing I'm feeling. What do I do with it? You
Yeah.
know? So yeah, I enjoyed it. I think Disney did all right on this one. They
Yeah.
they're, they've had a few misses recently, but this I think it was a hit. Uh,
Yeah. I think I think it had a lot to say about growing up. And we don't, I think we don't think about growing up a lot in concrete ways. We don't kind of think, okay, what's going on, and things are changing. Like the demolition thing was really cute when puberty came in and everything was demolished.
yeah,
And it's again, it's a good reminder that these things are traumatic. These things radically shift our bodies. These
right.
things, and we need to recognize that. At the same time, they're not the end of the world either. Like you have to find a balancing act
Yeah.
about all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. So I think we would both recommend Inside Out too.
Yeah,
If folks, particular, I would say particularly for teenagers. I think
yeah,
it really is. I think it will. It's the kind of film that, a teenager might go. They might have that ennui, like, oh yeah, okay, some cartoon movie. You know,
really? Teenagers do that?
I don't know about yours, but mine do.
Yeah,
Well, look, I've got three kids at home. Only two of them wanted to see the film.
yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I get you. Um,
Um,
yeah,
but I think that it's certainly a helpful, it can be a helpful, at least open conversation for for teenagers to talk about what they're feeling and how they're feeling. And
yeah,
that's
it would
important.
be interesting to play this for like a middle school group and then kind of try to get them to talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think again, I think we have a tendency. I think it's probably even more so today with all our phones and all our kind of our distancing devices. You know that the reality that we don't spend as much time on in one-on-one communication and
Right.
community building. Is I think my guess is that people can feel like this is only happening to me. Um,
Oh yeah.
you know, that I'm the only one
Yeah.
dealing with anxiety. I'm the only one that struggles with, am I a good friend or am I a bad friend? I'm the only one that, has to figure out all these complex thoughts about myself that don't fit together well. And again, movies can be powerful because they can remind us that no, this happens to a lot of people. That's why this
Right.
movie was made.
Right. Yeah, and that, and that we are all a whole lot more complex than I think the world tells us we are.
Yeah,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that's why I think that's something that churches should recognize too. We have a tendency to do a really bad job with presenting this idea that a Christian is always joyful. you know, that if you're Christian, happy and you know what, clap your hands.
Yeah.
Like you know, and to be honest, one of the things I thought about was I kind of feel like Christians too often want to make, are kind of like joys. They want everybody to be joyful. And there's
Yeah.
something wrong if you aren't joyful. And you need to think of yourself as a good person. And if you don't think of yourself as a good person all the time, then there's a problem. And the Christians need to recognize that all of us, that church should be a place that you should be able to come if you're sad.
Yeah.
Church should be a place
Yeah.
to to be able for you to come when you feel broken
It's
or you feel like you're really not a good person. That church should be a place that welcomes you even in those moments.
What is it? There's some old saying about church isn't uh what is it? It's like a home for saints, but a
Yeah,
hospital for sinners.
hospital for sinners. Yeah, no,
Um
yeah,
that we all come to this, that's the reason we're here.
yeah,
The very reason we're here is that we recognize our own brokenness. I
yeah,
certainly hope so. And even as pastor,
yeah,
me too.
absolutely.
I try to say that all the time. Look, I am, like Paul said, I'm the worst of sinners. I, don't, hopefully I can, set a decent example, but ultimately I'm not your role model. Jesus Christ is.
Well, and I think it's important. I'm glad you said it. I'll join you because I've done it as well. I do counseling on a regular basis. I probably will do that for the rest of my life. It helps me.
Yeah,
It's not a bad thing,
not,
and recognizing that I think one of the things I really worry about as a pastor is making people feel like if they're not happy, if they're not joyful, if they're struggling with something, somehow they're doing something wrong, and that's not That's not scriptural. I mean,
You're right.
like I like to remind people, a third of the Psalms, 50 of the 150 Psalms we have are Psalms of lament. They're people sometimes even screaming at God, going like, why on earth am I dealing with this?
Right.
And why don't you help me?
We
And
have a
God,
whole book called Lamentations.
yeah. And and I'm down and I'm broken and why aren't you here? And those psalms are songs, and they were in there so that somebody that had that emotion could sing when they couldn't speak, right? That they
Right.
could, and hopefully that they could join with others and sing that song of pain. And we we can't lose sight of the fact that as Christians, we need to welcome people and say, it's okay if you're sad today. It's fine.
Yeah.
God still loves you. We still love you. And hopefully, our connection will help you figure out the next step in your journey.
Yeah.
And so, um, again, I think the church can learn from this movie too, that help people integrate all this stuff. Don't make them feel like they have to shoot their quote unquote bad stuff to the back of their brain, because that's not going to help.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because it reminds me of a situation. I won't name names or even church locations. But the situation where
Good idea.
I was dealing with a lady who she was always unhappy, always had something to complain about, almost never smiling, you know, kind. There was always some, I mean, she was just eternally grumpy.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, somebody like that, I can legitimately say, are you actually a Christian? Because at some point, somewhere, there ought to be at least a little bit of joy, just a little, you know,
Yeah.
like you're just, I never saw it. You know?
Yeah.
And so I mean that's the other end of the spectrum for the happy joyful Christians is and you're right. I mean we should all be somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah.
We're
And
all
as Wesley put it, going on to perfection. Um,
right.
this, I don't know. I think Christians, we sometimes don't recognize that we're called to become more Christ-like, but we don't automatically become Christ-like just because we trust in Christ.
Right.
That justification, becoming at one with God, is part of salvation. It isn't the only part of salvation.
Right.
That part of salvation is becoming Christ-like, and that's a lifetime journey. And we're called to help one another, not beat each other up.
Yeah. Amen to that.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen to that. Wow.
So
You
put
know,
that on a bumper sticker. You are supposed to help me become more Christ-like, not yell at me.
right. It's funny because I was just talking to someone from the church here the other day about the podcast and how much I was really enjoying the fact that the three of us that do it all come from really different perspectives, and that we're still friends regardless of what's going on in the denomination or going on in the world, because that's the way it's supposed to be. It shouldn't be, oh well, Jonathan's I gotta hang out with Jonathan, that's silly. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, I think it's silly. One of my all-time best friends in ministry is as far to the left as I can imagine, okay? And I love the guy.
Yeah.
I am so glad that we served together at, like in the same area at one point in time,
Yeah.
ability group together. He has been one of my biggest long distance supporters in the whole process, and all of that stuff didn't mean anything to our relationship. It didn't mean anything to our being Christian brothers. That's so much more important um than the garbage in society, right?
Yeah.
All right, we've gone off on a little tangent. Uh let's bring it back in. We got to start talking about next week. For as far as Inside Out 2 goes, yes, recommend,
Go
worth a
see it.
watch.
Absolutely.
Particularly if you got teenage kids. And I like your idea. It might be a good idea if you do anything with middle school kids, youth group, when you can get it on DVD, could be a great discussion starter.
Yeah.
So your turn to pick a film. Probably not going to be hard to find something I haven't seen, as much as I love to watch the movies.
Are we gonna have Evan back or no?
We should have Evan back next week. Yes.
Okay. So I was thinking it might be nice to do a straightforward religious film, something that clearly hits a religious note, and then we can kind of talk about it. Does that
All
sound
right,
like fun?
cool. Yeah.
Okay, so and I was thinking, I kind of there's one movie that I haven't seen from this director that I was thinking about, and there's another one I haven't seen, but it's been a while. I think it'd be fun to stay with kind of great directors because we did Spike Lee a couple weeks ago.
Sure.
So, uh, would you be interested in either seeing Kundun, which is about the Dalai Lama, and Scorsese did a movie about it, about his young life, or would you want to see Silence, which is about uh, Catholic monks that he did as well? Either
Ooh.
one, I think, would be interesting just to kind of think
Um,
about faith through.
Silence is from 2016.
Yeah,
Two 17th century Portuguese missionaries, Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver. Wow. Uh, that one sounds good to me.
okay,
Silence. Where's that on? It's on Pluto TV, among other
yeah,
places. YouTube, Google Play, Fandango, Amazon Prime. It's on Amazon Prime. Okay. I can
yeah.
find it on Amazon Prime. That's easy enough.
Cool.
All right, so then we'll watch Silence next week.
Yeah.
I'll send Evan a message and tell him, prepare for the discussion and
And prepare. It's about the struggle of faith. So
nice.
it'll be
That
fun.
hey, that's a might get a little deep, but that's a good topic.
Yeah.
I don't mind getting a little deep on stuff. That's good. All right, my friend.
All right.
Appreciate the discussion this week. Friends, if you are so inclined, you want to follow along with the conversation, you know how to find us, subscribe, whatever that is. I put the link up on Facebook pages. I'm sure John shares it where he wants to. So you can follow along, and we appreciate any comments, anything you have to say. Again, we're not trying to get rich or famous or anything like that. Honestly, we're hope that folks are learning a little something as we go along too. That's really the 100% primary goal here. So, Jonathan, again, thank you. And
Yeah.
we will talk again next week, friends. Until then, keep on finding God in the dark. Take care and God bless.
Bye.